All right. This is the Cowboys and Unicorns podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Dan. And we're sitting here with our buddy, John Franey. Poured himself a little bit more bullet rye.
Yeah. This is my first encounter with rye.
Same here. So,
how are you liking it?
I dig it. I don't know. I'm a Scotch guy, so it might be a little less refined. Yeah. But sometimes that's not bad.
Yeah.
Especially with a cigar.
For sure. What are you smoking?
Pinar del Rio, Habano Sungrown. So it's a really ancient cigar that now they're selling for like, I think $1.50 or something.
Ooh. What do you mean? What do you mean by ancient?
Like they produced them a really long time ago, and they've got extras, so they just want to dump them.
Sweet.
And this is like basically the first batch of cigars I ever bought. When I like decided to get a bunch, and so Pinar del Rio is like always has a soft spot for me. So now that they're cheap, I buy a bunch, and I don't know, they're still good.
I mean, that's the best thing is to find the ones that are like $1.50 a stick.
If you can find something you love that's also cheap,
yep,
that's the way to go. Obviously, you have a better chance of liking things that are more expensive as far as like cigars and whiskey and stuff like that. But if you can find cheap stuff.
And the other thing, we talked about them on the last one because we were smoking them, but we had some Sosas that were just sitting.
Yep.
They've got to be close to 3 years old now, so they're great.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like $1 or $2 a stick. Mm-hmm. Not anything that people rave about, but I think if you let any cigar sit for a year at least, it does make a world of difference.
With humidity.
Yeah, if they're humidified.
Well, I guess either way, it will make a world of difference.
That's true.
One way or the other.
Yes. Both will affect change, positive or negative.
You got the pipe there, Dave? Or do you have
I do, yeah. I'm smoking the McKellen 30-year. I've been smoking it a lot lately because... It's a Peterson.
Ooh.
It's the Peterson my parents got me in Ireland. It's actually a second, so it has like a little crack on it, so I don't smoke it super often, but I kind of...
Oh, there's a crack on the side of the bowl?
Yes. So there's a slight crack right at the top of the bowl, and so it's kind of more of a smoke it every once in a while and try and keep it as a like memoir type thing instead of...
So is it better to smoke like now outside while it's cold to keep it colder?
Probably not.
Okay.
Because of the contrast, right?
Right.
Because it's cold, so
it's super hot on the inside.
Super hot on the inside, super cold on the outside. It's probably not very good for it.
Gotcha.
But
what have you done? Didn't you have like a bunch of estate pipes
I still
or something?
have a bunch of estate pipes.
Okay.
The last 2 months I've been bad. I haven't spent the time that I need to on doing the pipe stuff, but it got cold. And
yeah. What are you doing with those?
we're just going to restore them, and then we're just going to sell them.
Okay. Sweet.
I mean, so
on your site,
so
or
like you wash them out and buff them, or what?
So we washed them all out, and we sanded them with like 320 grit, just to get the layer of wax and their initial dye off of them. So then we'll re-dye them, rebuff them. Yeah, all sorts of nastiness. People's hand germs of centuries.
Right.
Where'd you get them? Did you buy them online?
eBay.
Or?
Yeah,
okay.
So you can like go on eBay and buy a lot of like 12 for relatively cheap, like $80 maybe. Depends on what's in there. But the only other pain is that some of them, like the stems, are like have all the bite marks. So you basically they're crap. So then it's a decision of like, do you make one and put 2 hours into it, or do you buy something? And so we've got them. We've done the salt treatment on probably 30 pipes, but haven't actually. Gabe and I each have one that we actually finished and we've smoked, but.
Sure. So where does the cost of the pipe come in? Is it more in the bowl or in the stem, or is it kind of an even split? Like, so if you kept the stem,
right,
or kept the bowl and made a new stem, like, would you still be making money on those, or not really?
It probably would be hard to do.
Okay.
It wouldn't be really, if you actually wanted to make money. Best route would be to just find a replacement stem, because you could buy one for like $5.
That's true. Yeah.
If it's actually a worthwhile pipe, then try and actually get like an original stem or a stem from that vendor.
Yeah.
Would be the way to actually get some money out of it then. But it's more try and sell them for like $25, and they're really only like $8 or $9 a piece when you buy them. So it's kind of more of a way that you could easily make a little bit of money instead of like making a whole pipe where you make a decent amount, but there's a lot more time commitment.
What would it take for you to heat this garage? Then you could make pipes all the time.
What do you mean?
Well, that is a great question. So I probably could get a legit heater put in here, but there's no outlets except for on the kitchen wall. There's one. So really, what I should do, and then it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because it's not insulated. So what I should do is insulate it.
If you did insulate it, I bet you'd get residual heat from the house.
And then and it would also help because it wouldn't cool down the house.
Right.
So I probably should do it.
No, I'm not saying you should. It would just make our lives more fun.
And it would make my pipe making life a little easier. But
true story.
I'm working on one right now that's really tough. So it's a calabash, like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
But it's a briar calabash with a meerschaum insert.
Okay.
So
the wider top lip is the insert part?
Is meerschaum. And actually the bowl is meerschaum as well. So it's basically just you're creating a stummel to house the meerschaum cap.
I don't know if you guys have seen Inglourious Bastards, but it gets me at the beginning.
Yep.
Like when the farmer pulls out like his little corncob pipe.
Yeah.
And then the Nazi pulls out his gigantic calabash that's like a foot long.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
So I have a buddy who he's like some type of English major or whatever from North Central. So he was like, could you make me a Sherlock Holmes pipe? I'm like, yeah, I could probably do that.
English major request Sherlock Holmes pipe.
It'll take much money. So we found a deal, but I need to get it done. It was nice today. And by nice, for those who aren't in Minnesota, it was 45 degrees. So I spent a couple hours working on it today.
I actually raked my leaves, so that
I
worked
saw
out.
that.
Wow. We just moved, so I'm not doing any of that.
I'm just waiting for snow to come, so then no one knows I didn't rake.
That's what I was, and then my wife came home and she's like, "It's warm. We should rake the leaves." Like,
I was really wondering. Driving around town today, so many people were like mowing their lawns and doing yard work, and it's like, I mean, you obviously didn't care because we already got snow once. So what made you decide to care?
2 weeks ago, it was covered.
Like if that snow hadn't gone away, you wouldn't have done it. So why do you
chances,
care now?
bro.
Right. I'm pretty sure there's like a relationship between like your age and how much you care about your lawn.
Yeah, for sure.
So probably like, I mean, we should conduct a poll or something, but I'm guessing like over the age of 45, your care level in how your lawn looks goes way, way up.
And neighborhood probably makes a difference.
Yeah, that's true too. Because I'm feeling the pressure because like we just moved and both of my neighbors have definitely recently mowed their lawn and raked their leaves.
Right.
So ours is like this little strip in between the two with longer grass and leaves all over. And I'm like, oh man.
Yeah. So I never feel the pressure because these neighbors, and I don't know who they are, so hopefully they don't stumble on the podcast, but
hopefully they do and they get pissed at you.
Yeah.
They're terrible. Like they don't mow their lawn for like 2 months at a time.
So and then they like mulch.
And like that neighbor's really good, but I have like this nice grace period of like if I don't mow my lawn for 2 weeks,
you only look like really the second worst.
Comparatively.
All right.
And then I'm like, well, they didn't care about their leaves, and I don't have time, so I'm not gonna. If I was the only lawn in the neighborhood, I would have been out there today. Like, oh crap, I'm gonna get this done. But,
way to compare yourselves to the bottom performers, Dave.
Yeah. There's certain areas you have to put as less important. Now, when Zozo listens to this, he'll probably send me a text and say, you need to care about your house. Get this stuff done.
Yeah, I'm worried about that. We've got a lot of stuff still to do on our house, but we've been working on it for like the past couple of months, and now that we've actually moved in and we're living in it, and it's tolerable, like it's probably just never going to happen.
Yeah, that's
like
kind
there's
of the
some
hard thing.
spots that like we didn't even finish painting, and I'm guessing we'll get to that.
Yeah,
but, like other stuff is just
that last 10% is the hard one.
It'll stick around probably until we move, and then we're like, oh crap, we got to do that.
It's stuff like the trim work and like all those little detail things that no one's gonna.
Yeah, like there's no quarter round on the floor, so there's like a little gap in between the baseboard and the floor. and I refinished the floor so you can see like the sander didn't get all the way over.
Oh, sure.
And
like
so the quarter round is supposed to cover that.
Yep.
But there's no quarter round. We never put quarter round back on in our Hancock house either. I mean, it's
so when you go to sell the house in 8 years, then you'll do that.
Yeah, probably.
If we're honest.
Do you think your ice cream cone consumption is going to increase over the next few months?
I don't know. We were given a DQ gift card by my in-laws.
For the listeners, he moved into a house directly behind a Dairy Queen.
I am 2 houses from Dairy Queen.
Like if you counted it out, it's probably 50 steps to the door.
Probably. And if you're running, which is likely with a blizzard, then or towards a blizzard.
It's like 23 steps. Yeah.
I don't know. We actually, when I lived in Starbuck, we were like a block and a half away from a DQ.
Yeah.
And that DQ is arguably better than the Morris one.
Yeah.
And we didn't go there that often.
Best ice cream in the state, right? That was what it was.
I would believe
Didn't I get that from WCCO or something?
I think so.
This year?
They were covered in the news.
Like, it's really good. They make their blizzards like better than any other place I've been to. But we didn't actually go that often because like you're not going to drive there. And when you go for a walk, you're going to walk farther than a block and a half.
Yeah.
So it's like, and obviously like we were kids, so I didn't get to pick, but like we always went somewhere else, like even for ice cream. So I don't know. We'll see with this one, like if the kids really want to go.
Right. It's probably based on the kids. Like if the kids are always going that way, like, hey, I did my laundry and cleaned my room, so I have $2. Can I go to Dairy Queen?
Yeah, I would send them. And we're also like, I think we're 4 blocks maybe from my parents. So I'm looking forward to like the next couple of years because my oldest can ride his bike now.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Like, hey, bike over to Grandma and Grandpa's and hang out.
Yeah.
I don't want to see you anymore.
Well, that's the perks of being right in town too, because it's like easy enough once they're old enough to be like.
Because before it was like an excursion.
Mm-hmm.
But
when I was in Hackensack, Minnesota, so we moved there when I was like 9. We were 7 miles out of town, and we would actually bike into town sometimes.
Okay.
Really?
Granted, like it's a town of 300 people. There really was nothing to do.
So, how old were you?
Like, probably 10, 11 when we would started doing it.
That's a pretty good workout. It's like a 14-mile bike ride.
It's ambitious.
Well, we would bike in, and then we'd get a ride back. My dad, his church office was in town, so we'd bike in, hang out for a couple hours, throw the bikes in the van, and then go.
When I was on the cross country team here at the U, the girls team once they had like a long run for the day or whatever, and they just ran to Cyrus and brought a cell phone with them, and then called our coach and said, "Hey, we're in Cyrus. We're done with our run. Come pick us up."
See, I prefer that type of running, like where you can just run straight towards something and you don't have to
loop
repeat.
back.
Yeah, like it's terrible especially if you have to like.
Wait, did you just say I prefer that type of running?
Like I prefer running where you can just go towards a goal and you don't have to loop back.
Yeah, but none of those sentences make any sense to me.
Yeah, to you.
Because you don't prefer running.
I don't prefer running. However do you line it up?
Right. But unless there's a bear. Because bears will kill you.
Well, right.
For sure.
I would prefer running in that instance. You're right.
Yeah.
Name all the instances where running is the preferable activity.
Axe murderer.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's valid.
No, John, you're an American. Shoot him with your gun.
Right. Guns, yeah.
Guns are good.
That was an attempt at a can of worms, I think.
I don't really want to get into it.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you want to hear about it,
I'm bored.
Check out the Roasted Christian podcast. John, give us maybe a couple minute synopsis of who you are and what
blurb.
you do.
Myself and Bobby Culbertson, I don't know if he's
Cumberbund.
We have a podcast called The Roasted Christian, where we take dearly beloved traditional concepts and kind of tear them apart and make people angry. But that's not our intent. Our intent is actually just to get people to think about the things that we like traditions that we have and beliefs and stuff in the Christian faith. But generally that seems to be the result because, I don't know, maybe just where we are and the context of our church and stuff, but
right.
We've successfully managed to ruffle quite a few feathers.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not all theology and stuff. Like, we have frequently discussed, like, the purpose of the Second Amendment and stuff like that. But we had a really intense, was it like it was like an hour 45, maybe 2 hours with Dave Jr. In
the one on Trump?
David's basement. Yeah,
yes.
on Trump.
I
that went
there.
on and on and on and around and around and around.
And I was just sitting.
And we
in the
like didn't
control
really
room,
let
like,
up. And at the end, I was like, "Oh man, how worth it was that? Probably not." But it happened. So if you want to listen, I guess.
So just for fun, since we both have podcasts, I'm interested on your perspective. If you, and I think I kind of know, but it'd be interesting to hear you elaborate on it.
Dave, you're going way too meta right now.
You already know, like, if you know that the topics that you're discussing are going to cause division and upset people, why continue doing it?
I think to a certain degree, we still choose to believe that people will have a sane reaction. And then time after time, we're like, oh man, why are they doing this? But yeah, every time we're like, okay, so we need, well, because for us, like, I think the foundation of why we started it was to talk about things that we fundamentally disagreed about.
Okay. Yep.
But those seem to be few and far between, I guess, at least as far as like general,
Right, where you and Bobby
world
fundamentally
topics
disagree with each other.
So the idea was kind of to argue amongst ourselves.
Sure.
But was interesting that, like, I mean, because we've picked some pretty, like, maybe for some people it's super important, but for me it was like, okay, whatever, we can just talk and who cares.
Yep.
And even then, like, I don't know, we brought up annihilationism.
Yep.
And neither one of us had really, like, researched it. Both of us kind of come from, like, the hell is a real thing, eternity lasts forever, or like it.
Hell is
they're
an
punished
eternity.
forever, and all that kind of stuff.
Can you clarify what annihilationism?
Yes, annihilationism means that after a certain period of time, I believe most annihilationists actually still hold to the idea of hell as punishment, but they say that hell is eternal, but eternal death is not a thing. So the idea is at some point, humans are destroyed or annihilated. And that basically comes from a lot of the language that you find in the Bible about destruction and death rather than unending torment.
Right.
So basically all we did was we had a couple verses and a few articles we had found, and we kind of just hashed it out. And by the end of it, we're like, well, actually, this might hold some water, I guess. Like,
And people got mad.
that one actually was okay.
Okay.
It was less controversial than Harry Potter, actually. Go figure.
Right.
But
Superstition runs rampant in
so-
West Central
but
Minnesota.
all of that to say, like, we set out, like, kind of our goal is to basically pick something controversial enough that hopefully he and I can disagree.
Right.
But at this point, we've basically just been trying to find guests
Right.
who disagree with us.
Who disagree. Right. Because don't you think part of that is, even if you and Bobby disagreed on a lot of things, you guys get together and spend enough time talking, and you're both
We can kinda
open-minded,
work it out.
you're going to both work towards the truth, and if you're both working towards it together, you're probably going to start to, like, unify on a certain path
Yeah.
of, like, thinking.
Ironically, the thing that we disagreed most about is whether or not the future exists. And like the free will kind of stuff.
Okay.
Like Bobby was very, very staunchly, not quite Calvinistic, but from my perspective, the things that he's saying require Calvinism in order to function. So my whole point was, if the future exists,
Okay.
then our actions have already been determined for that future place to be real. Otherwise,
Sure.
Like because if I'm truly at a fork right now and I could go left or right,
Yep.
then the future has to contain both of those possibilities. The
Yep.
only problem is it's an endless, infinite combination of possibilities.
Right.
I mean, I could either come here and Dan could come here, or we could both not.
Yeah.
And like the combination of all those things requires an infinite number of possibilities, neither of which I believe are truly known until they happen.
Okay.
So that to me says the future can't yet exist. Maybe it exists as possibilities, and I believe God is aware of all of those possibilities. Like,
Yep.
He's definitely smart enough to get all those things in line.
Right. He could definitely piece it all together and say this is how it's going to end. But
Yeah, exactly. So things like prophecy, I think, still work in that scenario.
right.
But we also see, like in the Bible, like God changes His mind. How does that work?
Right.
If like the future is set, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
Bobby was basically saying like God is just smart enough where He knows everything that's going to happen before it does. So the future is set. We just don't know what's going to happen, which to me sounds like Calvinism, but it's not like the straight up 5 points or whatever.
Right.
So I don't know. But yeah, we never reconciled each other on that one. But that's probably the only one, actually.
And that's one of those things that it's a fun thing to talk about. But
Yeah, that one
it's
actually was fun.
It's also not like, dang, where's Bobby? Oh, he was wrong about that.
Right.
He's
He's
in hell.
no longer with us. But I guess that whole controversy was super big, like at the turn of the century.
Okay.
Like this century, like 2000 or whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
And so Greg Boyd like wrote a book called like God of the Possible, and it's this whole thing about like open theism, and I think it's really cool, but it's really not mainline
Sure.
evangelical at all.
Interesting. We're watching, Haley and my wife are watching a show called The Good Place.
Yeah, okay, everyone is watching that.
Well, Gabe
like, literally everyone.
Gabe told us to watch it.
Is it on Netflix?
Yeah. And
Bobby and Whitney stayed up so Bobby goes to bed at like 9.
yeah, me too.
They
What?
stayed up until like 2 in the morning to watch the entire thing.
Well, here's the problem with
now
it.
my wife
it a show?
watching it. Yeah.
So it's only 13 episodes.
I kind of want to resist
they're-
because of the hype.
They're
but we'll get to
20-minute
that later.
episodes like The Office. So
they
those
go
shows
fast.
are the worst because you start it at 9:30 and you're like, oh, we'll watch an episode.
Sure.
And then
And those story
You're
arcs
like-
are so fast.
you go do something and then the next one started because you were gone for 30 seconds.
Right.
And then you're like, keep going. And next thing you know, you've actually watched 5 and it's midnight.
So Hannah and Gabe have watched them.
Yeah, Gabe's the one who told us to watch it.
Okay. So
But
you
it's
guys have
just-
seen them. Bobby and Whitney have seen them.
Yeah.
My wife, I think, has seen all of them. I'm not sure.
Okay. It's just interesting because I'm loosely connecting it with what we were talking about, but the good place, there's a good place and a bad place, and
Right,
it's basically heaven and hell. And so it's synopsis is a girl dies and accidentally gets sent to the good place when she's like the most terrible person ever. So, and that's not ruining it because you find that out in like the first 2 minutes of the first episode, but it's a really interesting, funny show.
Okay.
Like in the good place, you can't swear, so she's always saying like, "What the fork?" and she's such a bench, and like all these different things. And it's pretty comical. It's great.
I started a movie last night at like 1 a.m.
Why'd you do that?
I drank that Monster. Remember
That big monster, yes.
And I like did a bunch of chores, and I was like, I still want to relax. And then I stayed up to like 3. I think it's called like To Rome with Love. No, something. It was a Woody Allen movie.
Okay.
It was really good.
Huh.
I like Woody
Like a
Allen.
love story.
Yeah, it was like 5 love stories in one movie.
The only Woody Allen movie I've ever seen is Annie Hall.
I haven't seen that one, but I need
was
to.
like 14, I think, and we were in London, and I didn't understand any of it. It like I'm not sure if I blocked it out or if it was just super boring or I was tired. But like, that's the one that's the movie that got the Oscar over
huge.
the original Star Wars.
It's like, is that like 88 or 86 or something?
That would be.
Or is that all the way back in the
77.
70s? Oh, okay. There's a really cool documentary on Netflix about Woody Allen, and
Okay,
he's a weird guy, but I like his movies.
sure. I think that's the only one I've seen, and I
Yeah.
don't remember it.
Yeah. It's kind of messed up. He kind of like married his kid, adopted kid.
Oh, wow.
That's a whole other story.
Yikes.
Now let's talk about ethics.
Good stuff.
Okay,
So where can people find your podcast? Just so we.
it is on all of the podcast places.
Okay.
So whatever favorite
the website
app you
is
like. I'm assuming most people do iTunes. The website itself is roastedchristian.com. I believe there's no E in the roasted. That could be a domain thing. I'm not sure.
I wonder who owns the correct spelling URL or domain.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so my question is, I'm not really a podcast guy, which is kind of funny because
you do a podcast.
We do a podcast, but I don't really listen to them. But so for people who do podcasts, do you typically find their websites or do you just go through iTunes?
iTunes.
Yeah, so that's I mean,
definitely.
Just search on iTunes, Roasted Christian.
Yeah, unless you know the person, and then you go.
I listen to some
or something like that. If you see it on Facebook, that would be the only
some
one.
of them are. I listen to some like on WNYC, like NPR podcasts, and they have a really easy website. So sometimes I listen to them. They have short stories on there too, like New Yorker short stories.
Okay.
So every once in a while, I'll listen on an actual website, but most of the time, just an app.
Right.
I listen to Jared Sebesta's Repurpose podcast through his website, but that's only because like I got there at work from like looking him up, and then I just like saved it as a bookmark so that I could get back to it.
Sure.
I probably listen to 4 or 5 hours of podcast a day.
Yeah,
a day. Yeah.
Holy crap!
I listen.
So is it just the nature of what you do? Like you can multitask like that? Like I have my leisure time is the only time that I would get like to listen.
So I listen to podcasts at work when I'm doing something. Like I figure out what I'm doing, and then it's repetitive, and like it doesn't require me to. Like I just at my desk. Sometimes I have to do stuff.
Sure.
That doesn't. So then I'll listen to it then, and then when I run, I listen to podcasts, and then when I do chore, like when I just when I do laundry and my dishes and stuff around the house, I listen to podcasts.
Okay.
When I check my email, I listen to podcasts. I'm too much a
music guy, I think. Like,
I don't listen very much to music.
For the short bursts, it's always music.
So I listen to music constantly throughout the day because I have a desk job. But then, like Dan, I'll listen to a podcast or something where people are actually talking if I know, okay, I have like an hour or 2 hours of like mindless tasks, like admin type work where it's just like dragging fields or it's working in a spreadsheet and you're just changing values. That's the type of stuff where I'll focus on what they're talking about and just like do the mind-numbing stuff.
The things that would drive you crazy if you didn't have podcasts.
Exactly, if you didn't have something to think about. Otherwise, music, I listen to music, well, I think last year, so Spotify does this, like, how many hours of music have you listened to in a year?
Right.
And I think last year I listened to 24 straight days worth of music.
Dang.
That's impressive. Is what the number was. So.
I just started like doing Spotify again because I got an Xbox. Yep. And I don't have like any speakers set up in that room.
Right.
So my dad and Bobby came over and we were going to have like just talk about church stuff and drink some scotch. And I was like, well, we need some kind of background music. So I just went on Spotify. And I think it was like relaxed deep house music or something.
I love their playlist.
It was super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll turn on like they have a whole focus genre of playlists that are just, no words, just all sorts of different stuff. Like one that is themed off of the Interstellar soundtrack, but it's just all sorts of different music that falls into that same genre. That's really a fantastic one. Like if you're doing something where you have to focus so much that words or like an artist will distract you.
Yeah.
Turn on something like that.
That happens sometimes. I get too into the words and the rhythms.
Yep.
So Dave, you had a tweet that John said maybe, I don't know, we don't have to get into this now.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Let's go for it.
You had a tweet that John said maybe we should talk about on the podcast. Do you want to read your tweet?
So my phone's at 1%. Let's see if I can do this before. The cold
10,
zapped my
9,
battery.
8, 7.
I'm going to pull up the Twitters so that I can actually read the tweet. Here, Oh, Donald Trump. He's my first tweet that pulled up.
He's had some doozies today.
Oh, man.
I just like
He's been
Kim
calling
Jong-un insult me by calling me old when I would never call him
have you
short
seen
and fat?
that tweet in like the child crayon drawing?
No.
Okay, so there's an extension you can use on Chrome that turns font into like child scribbles, like in red crayon.
Okay.
And they put it on that tweet.
That's awesome.
And it's like a little too close to reality.
You're like, this is accurate.
Not that we don't really want to talk about Trump on this podcast.
No. Right, okay. Before my phone dies, I'll read my tweet. So to just give a slight, tiny background, I went to InterVarsity to help do worship.
What's InterVarsity?
It's the on-campus like student ministry. So I got asked last minute because the leader, Jared, was like sick, and he was like, hey, could you come tomorrow and help lead worship? I'm like, yep, here. Like, I'll try and find some songs. And I'm like, well, what are they talking about? He's like, racism on the campus and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, thanks. Like, just drop me into that one. And so then afterwards, after going and being a part of that experience, I was just kind of thinking, and it was also post Dreamforce where they talk all about like equality and all this different stuff. So I tweeted
all the stuff Dave hates.
I didn't say that.
Equality sucks.
I'm sorry, Dave.
I tweeted, sometimes I wonder if all the talk about racism, equality, privilege, etc., is widening the gap instead of bridging it.
Okay, so I had two thoughts to that. The first thought, actually the second thought, I'll say first, because I think I'll remember the first one more than the second, because I totally just lost the second. Yep, we're going with the first one.
All right.
Okay, so my initial reaction was kind of in line with what Matt O'Leary followed up on.
Yep.
The idea that as a generalized whole or a group or demographic of people,
Yep.
if you identify it, okay, so we talk about African Americans versus white privilege.
Yep.
Then if I'm a member of white society,
Yep.
or I identify with that group, then I think that yes, in general, all of the incessant talk of the disparity between these two groups
Yep.
hurts my opportunity to bridge the gap. So in that sense, I think the gap is wider.
Yep.
On the other hand, I think for a very long time, the gap had been either ignored or mitigated.
Yep.
On an individual level. And
right.
So the push now, and really I think social media does maybe not injustice, but weird justice to all these issues.
Right.
And it makes them feel like I have experienced or I've observed inequality or injustice like
Yep.
with my neighbors or right next door.
Right.
And that's not the case.
Right.
So we hear about these things, and I believe they are true, and I think that there are some legitimate issues of inequality and privilege.
Yep.
But for I feel like then I project those things everywhere I go and everything I think about. If I take too much time on them or I just dwell on them all the time,
Yep.
then that's my framework for every interaction that I have.
Yep.
And in that sense, I think it does, unless I'm actively pursuing kind of restoring, and that's the thing, I personally don't have any, bridges or gaps to bridge with people.
Like you and a person you know.
Right.
Right.
So if I did, and like I feel like that conversation would be necessary for me to raise my awareness, like, oh, what am I doing here? Like, what can I do to help other people who maybe are not privileged the way I am? But I think in other circumstances, like, I mean, here in Morris or whatever, like, all it does is in my brain now, there's an inherent, maybe false divide between me and anyone I meet.
Right.
That doesn't have to be there.
Yes.
But I've already assumed certain things about myself as like a member of like, white class.
Right.
And I've already assumed things about other demographics of people that I didn't have to.
Right.
So I think, there can be then an artificial widening of distance in between relationship. I don't know if that makes sense.
But do you think like, I think I get what you're saying. It puts you, it sets you in a particular mindset or frame
that you never personally, like, you wouldn't have gone there if it wasn't.
But I think the counter to that is that frame exists whether you're aware of it or not. And so to Dave's point, it's like if we just assume that, like, if we assume that there is the divide, right, and that all the people who are making and the who are making the claim that, like, here's this inequality and you've got the privilege, and you're unaware of that and no one ever talks about it, that's worse. So you're saying, Dave, like, if we talk about it, you're accentuating the problems. If we talk about inequality, we're making inequality, we're almost promoting it. But with almost no other problem in the world, you say, if we just quit talking about it, it will be better.
Right. So
most other things, you say,
right,
if there's a problem, there needs to be a discussion. There needs to be awareness of the problem in order to solve the problem. If we're not aware of it, if we don't talk about it, if there's no central square in which to debate about it, then there's no, then we're not going to see progress in it.
Right, I would agree.
Right. I think the point of that tweet wasn't to say, like, let's just never talk about it ever again, and then it'll go away or it'll be fixed.
Okay. I think that's what I got from your tweet.
Right.
It was like, shut down the discussion.
Right.
Quit talking about inequality, and then it'll be way easier to be equal.
I was kind of fishing for...
I guess it's counterintuitive.
For other people's thoughts. I was kind of fishing by posting that. Like, okay, so when we were at Dreamforce, right, they're talking about equality is one of, like, their key, like, their 4 founding pieces of Salesforce's company's culture, right?
Yep.
Equality is, like, in there.
Here's
right?
a core value.
Core value, equality. Mm-hmm. And then the entire keynote stuff is all focused around women and like this whole, like, oh, look what this woman did and how she's, like, breaking the glass ceiling and look at all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And in general, like, it's actually illegal to discriminate against someone based on their sex or their race and pay them less, right? That is actually illegal. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and certain people don't still have, sexism and racism that affects how they pay their employees, but it is technically illegal.
Yep.
Right? And so by continually, like, bringing it up, where I would just be like, yeah, that's totally normal for a woman to be the CEO. When it's brought up over and over again, it makes you be like, start to think. Like,
except that it's not totally normal for women to be CEOs. Like, if you look at the data.
Right.
Like, it's not.
I think the weird thing is the disparity or whatever between, like, the cultural mindset and our own individual outlooks. So, like, for you personally, living and working under a female CEO is completely fine. Like, you don't have
I
a problem
wouldn't
with
think
that.
anything of it. I would,
But on the other hand, society at large sees a radical disparity, I think, between male leaders and female, or, like, the amount of pay.
The pay gap is very, very, very narrowed. I was looking at it today just to see. So in 2015, it was like, I believe it was like 10.3%, and now it's 8.2% difference between male and female.
This is in the U.S. or worldwide? Or
I believe it was worldwide.
Wow.
Actually. And, like, they had male, female, and then also by race. Okay. So, I mean, when you actually break down the information, then you also see that there's differences between races and different things like that. But the other thing I couldn't find anything on was by same job, right? Like if there's me as a Salesforce admin and a woman as a Salesforce admin, like what's the percentage?
I don't think we have that
there. Because you can't make that straight comparison just based on women on average get paid X amount and men on average do, because
people are holding different jobs.
You have to look at it specific to the industry and the market.
Well, if lawyers get paid more and there's 70% male,
yeah,
then
that would be something.
Then there's, do you know what I mean? Then there's more people making that high wage, but maybe lawyer A and lawyer is male and lawyer B is female and they're making the same.
Right.
Sure.
But overall, if there's less females in the higher paying jobs, then the statistics are going to say that women make less. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So, I think this was the second point. I saw a commercial today during the Vikings game in which we won. Yay.
Vikes.
But there was a commercial for, it was like Ford or I don't know.
Okay.
But they were in a dealership and everybody was super happy. And what made me notice was that every group of people that they showed were like couples. And they literally had a couple of every different race. Like they had a white couple, they had a black couple, they had like an Asian couple. There were all these different couples, and they showed them like sequentially.
Yep.
So I had been thinking about this already, which is why it kind of caught my eye. But so the interesting thing there is, I think, the change. I think we tend to notice that something is changing and pay more attention to that.
Yep.
When really the important thing is like to remember why we're changing and the way that things used to be and the way that things can be.
Yep.
If we have conversations about them and we're intentional. So I'm sure whoever filmed and wrote that commercial was very, very intentional and maybe had a talk from like whoever was running their deal. Like, okay, you need to make sure that everybody we show is like across the board for ethnicity. And so that we represent everybody and we're not singling anybody out and it's not like just homogenous white and whatever.
Yep.
So in that environment, I could see like you, David, for example, being like, whoa, like what is all, like what's the fuss? I don't have a problem with anybody.
Yeah.
Why do we have to film all these people? But on the user end, especially for someone I think outside of the homogenous white kind of group, even in a TV commercial, I think it might be important to see like that the range on a commercial where maybe like, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, that was just not a thing. Like,
that wouldn't have been. Yep.
So I think in that respect, like we notice the changes and maybe we're kind of like, I'm thrown off by it, or I guess I just notice it like, oh wow, that like they definitely, I can tell they made sure to get everybody in there.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think the change itself is important because like we're actively taking steps towards equality.
Yep.
Even in a commercial, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I think the hard thing, there's two pieces. And like first is, I think people have a hard time. When you look at it, I mean, as a country, we've said women and men are equal. It's wrong and illegal to treat and discriminate and all these different things, treat them differently, right? All races are equal, right? It's wrong and illegal to discriminate against them in a workplace and all this stuff, right? So there's that piece that I think people lose sight of like, well, fundamentally, if you look at it just on like a huge wide scale, like there's not a racism and inequality issue.
Legally.
Right, like the overarching stance of the country is that like we see this, it's not an issue, right? Now, people are crappy, and so there's always going to be people who are going to be racist on both sides. There's going to be people who are sexist. And so that's always going to be a thing. But it's all of these conversations, and that commercial is less what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Than like the big rallies and the conversations that are happening, where what's actually being done is it's like the unhealthy church type style of like shame and like guilt to force you to feel like, oh, well, you're white and you have all this privilege and you don't actually deserve what you got. It's just because you're white. That's actually widening the gap, causing frustration for people who are from whatever class is being like pushed against, when it's like it's different cells of specific things where, yes, people treat others with inequality, but it's super unhealthy, at least from my perspective, to say like you have all this privilege and you should feel bad about it because there are black people who are treated wrongly, or there are women who don't make as much as you in your job. You know, like...
Can I ask you like a personal question?
Yeah.
Do you personally feel guilty for being white, or for the privilege that affords you?
No.
Okay. So why does it make you uncomfortable when you hear those things, if you don't personally feel, just because you think they're not true?
Right. Just because it makes me... It's a one-sided, slanted argument to try and cause... It's not bringing people together and saying, hey, fundamentally, like, we're all created equal. What can we do to work together and help, like, stop these situations? Instead, it's usually the white people or this is going on and we're all being discriminated against. And it's a polarizing type of a presentation instead of a unifying, and there's a specific issue, let's work together to find a solution.
Right. So I think maybe a corollary or an example of that would, if you want to get rid of pink elephants, you don't think about pink elephants.
Right.
So talking about race all the time only exacerbates the idea that we are racially separated. Yes. Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so the reason that right after that InterVarsity meeting, I was just like annoyed was because the person who presented it was a, maybe 21, 22-year-old white female who took the story of the Good Samaritan and put it through a totally millennial United States 2017 like perspective, right? So she was like, okay, so there was so and so person, the pastor or whatever walks by. He's probably like high class. He's never been discriminated against. He has all this privilege. And since no one's around to see him, he walks by. And so she goes through each of the scenarios and like puts this spin on it. She goes, and then, the man walks by and we don't know, that what his gender or sexuality was. And, and he sees this person in a ditch and he doesn't say, hey, what's your sexuality? And if I don't have a fundamental problem with that, I'll help you out. And so what's your class? Like, where do you come from? She just puts this whole spin on it that takes it from like, here's what was written. And like,
she's probably just trying to interpret it for like modern day though. Like how do you apply it to today?
Because I feel like the Good Samaritan...
Because there's no Samaritans in our region.
It was, I think, a very shocking example of cross ethnicity. Like, we don't associate with you whatsoever,
right? Because you're a half
based
breed,
on where you live and who you're descended from,
right?
So I think there are parallels. There might be a risk of taking it too far, but
right. I thought it was taking an interpretation and trying to find a way to twist it to make the white people on campus feel this, like, you guys aren't doing enough and there's all this racism and all this stuff and you guys are all comfortable because you're white and you don't care.
Sure.
And it's going on and you need to wake up. And if you're actually Christians, like, you need to be out actively speaking out against racism and inequality, and you have all your privilege and, you know, like, you need to use it for someone else.
Would you be fine, like, if someone just said, like, you have privilege, but you don't have to feel guilty about it? Like, if that was more the message? So or would you still be like, I don't know, would you be like, no, privilege isn't a thing?
I guess I don't know where I stand on the whole, actually, the privilege argument and why it's such a big thing. But I feel like that's totally a skewed thing. Like, am I supposed, like, because I worked hard and have the position I have and make the money that I do, like, is that privilege that then I should, like, that is only because of my...
A lot of the privilege that people talk about are the things that were outside of your control. So
there's systemic
where you
things.
were born, the family you were born into,
Yep.
the education that you got, none of those things you could work for or chose to get. I guess my question is, like, I think it's not a question. I guess it's an assumption or an analysis of kind of the difference. I think the people who truly feel that there is a problem with gender or race or those sorts of things are the ones who naturally feel compelled to talk about it.
Right.
And the ones who think, yeah, there might be an issue, but it's not that bad. Or something along those lines.
Sure.
Tend to downplay the conversation because at the core, it's not that big a deal.
Right.
Would you agree with that, or?
Probably in some parts.
Okay.
I think the hard thing, I guess, is really where this all comes from, is that I think that the majority of the things that you see, whether social media or the few times that I've been somewhere where, like, the whole, like, race inequality, white privilege conversation is going on, it's not actually necessarily let's try and find a solution. Let's unify. Let's, like, can we all agree on these fundamental things, right? And if we all agree on them, like, hey, how can we make a difference? Mm-hmm. Instead, it's, let's try and throw out these shocking things to polarize, make you realize how much privilege that you have, and make you feel like you're not doing enough. And there's all of this racism and all this stuff that's rampant that you're, like, being passive and overlooking, or you just don't care. And if so, you're terrible. Like, all these
like, if this
things.
isn't a top priority in your life, you're doing it wrong. Just like you feel like the message.
Even maybe that there's no tools or opportunity to do anything about it. Like, I've definitely been frustrated by that. Like, I think there are some serious issues, like, nationally that we're still dealing with, and, like, I think it's a process, like, that was started, like, when the country founded, like, that we still have to work on. But I would agree, like, all the things that we see and that we're presented with in these conversations, the product is just either shame or frustration, like,
right,
or apathy even, like,
right.
Well, that's an issue, but I don't know what to do about it.
Right.
So then, like, you just go out or, like, around your day and sort of with this feeling of, like, I don't know, like, I'm ineffectual or something, like,
right,
because I'm not the warrior all the time.
Right.
So yeah, that's hard. Like,
right.
I don't know what to do.
I think to, like, put this, like, in a practical example.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, sometimes, and I don't know if being I don't know if this is actually a solution or is actually working well, but, like, I was in my department at work. I had a chance to interview somebody, and just being aware of, like, we were interviewing somebody who was originally not from the U.S.
Sure.
And frankly, it had an accent that was a little bit difficult to understand.
Sure.
And so if I'm completely unaware of my own biases towards people who talk like me, sound like me, and have backgrounds like me,
Yep.
I could just write that person off immediately to be like,
Sure.
I don't know if they're the right fit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Instead of looking
Right.
at like, okay, what's the hard facts on
Right.
the resume and their experience
Yep.
and all the relevant things for
Yep.
the position.
Yep.
And I think it's healthy to be aware of, hey, I might have some like initial triggers of I heard this, this, and this, and it was a little bit difficult, and so I'm writing this person off. And that would be not fair to the person's skills and hard work that they put in just because of their background.
Yep.
So I think some of this conversation, at least for me, has made me a little bit more aware of what I might naturally do or subconsciously do, bringing some of those subconscious biases that you probably have to light, and just being aware of that, so you can go, okay, I got to stick to this person's character and their skills and all of the relevant things, so as not to discredit them for things that they can't control.
Well, and the crazy thing, speaking of like being a foreigner, is like when you go to another country, it's painfully clear how unlike you are to everybody else. Like you can literally just walk down the street and you know, like, I'm an outsider. I don't fit in. And like, even with, quote, white people, like we went to Argentina and even in Spain, like, I mean, there's a mix, but generally like light-skinned European descent, whatever. But the way like we dress, the way we talk, the time we eat supper, like none of it fit. So having that perspective, like, and then coming back here and you see all the things, like you said, like our subconscious, and then like having somebody try to enter into that context and standing out like in every single regard is like, I think it takes intentionality to get through that and to see like who the person really is. Because otherwise, like all you see on the surface is like, oh, they're different. Like, and then that's what stands out.
Right.
It's almost weird that as humans, that's how that seems like a default.
Oh yeah.
Almost like the default operating system, is I want to interact with and be with and work with people like me and people that understand me and get me and that look like me. And and I don't know if that's just like, if that's inherent to the way humans are, or I mean, a bunch of it's obviously learned.
Yes. I think that is hard. I think that's also hard.
You learn those things
up in small town Minnesota, right?
For sure. You're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. You're learning a bunch of things that you're not even aware that you did learn.
Right. Yep.
We had a friend when I was in Hackensack, and big black dude named Jared. An awesome guy. Me and my best friend Adam were friends with him. He was homeschooled through like maybe 10th grade.
Yeah. And Hackensack's in northern Minnesota in the woods.
And then he went
just for context
in the woods.
And then when he went to public school for the last 2 or 3 years, he was probably the first African American black skinned person to go to that school in like 10 years. Right? Yeah. So there's that piece of when you grow up somewhere like here, you also don't have that daily exposure to like realize what's normal and what's not. And so you build your normal of like, like I'm always around white people and here's how we talk. Here's, their family is just like my family when I go over there for a sleepover, all that type of stuff.
Here's the cultural expectations.
Right.
So here's an interesting tangent. There's like, speaking of kind of the race conversations, there's kind of 2 different routes that people seem to take, like about being accepting. And the first one is basically like, I'm colorblind. I don't see race. I don't see like, we're all the same on the inside. The other route is, I see that you're different and I appreciate the difference rather than being thrown off by it.
Right.
To me, the second seems much more healthy.
Right. I think so too. But okay.
Because then you're disregarding, if you go, I don't see color. Well, it's probably not true. Cause
that's the other thing. It's
pretty much a lie.
And then it's like, okay, so you're not recognizing the difference of my culture, my heritage, and my experience. Right. And you're saying, my experience is the same as yours. And
it's
they're
not.
like, no, how would you know what my experience is?
Right.
You can't even tell me.
So,
like if my, I mean, just to put it like in different terms, like if my dad dies and then Dave says, Dan, I know exactly what you're going through. I'm going to be like, no, you don't. Your dad's not dead.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a probably a gross misrepresentation, but still a similar type thing.
Right. It's a
you
similar line
can't
you
tell
can draw.
me what my experience is.
Right.
So maybe, okay, there's an interesting thought. David, maybe you are pissed because everyone is telling you, as a white male, this is how you live your life. This is how privilege works.
Yep.
This is how you should feel about it.
Yep.
And that, I mean, true or not, like, nobody should tell you, like, based on your ethnicity and, like, where you grew up.
Right.
Nobody should be able to tell you, like, this is who you are and this is how you feel and this is how you act.
Well,
Is that part of it?
I think that's probably a piece of it. In maybe some of it healthy and some of it not. Right?
Okay.
Like I think there's a piece of when I hear all the talk of privilege, I look at it's like I bought my first car. I didn't have my parents buy my car for me. Right. Like
Sure.
I didn't go to college, and when I went for one semester, I tried to work 40 hours a week as well as do classes and pay for it myself, and it didn't work. So then I had to drop out, go work hard. And finally, I'm in a position, right, where people would look at that and they'd be like, you probably knew somebody, you went and got this expensive degree, you're a white person, like, this was handed to you, right?
There's
and
also,
it takes value away, like it devalues.
You've probably kicked some poor people at some point.
there's also a class thing where, I mean, people who, I mean, even look at the last presidential campaign where, like, people are being told, like, you're white, you have privilege, and you're like, I live in a lot of angry white people who lost their jobs,
Right.
who are like, you don't know that, like, I'm poor.
And when I look at it,
Quit telling me I have all this. Like, I can't pay my bills.
Yeah.
I used to have a job, and now I don't.
Yeah. And when I look at it like having a daughter that's growing up, and when I look at, I mean, any child that's growing up, I don't want the message they're being told to be, well, if you don't score such and such on this privilege test, it means that you're not going to have opportunities. And then on the other side, like, if you do score such and such, like, everything is going to be handed to you, right? I think that's an unhealthy thing to teach, like this whole privilege matrix of, hey, I mean, if you were born in Chicago and you have parents who aren't together, like, odds are you're probably not going to succeed. That's not a great thing to plant in children's minds as they're growing up. Instead, say, if you work hard, you can succeed. In America, like, by the overarching, like, if you work hard, you can be successful.
That's also sort of a simplistic model, though, because there's tons of people who work hard and aren't successful. Like, I think both of those are simplistic models. You have privilege, you'll be successful. You don't, you won't. That's simplistic, like you're saying.
Yep. But if you're passionate about something and you pursue it with all you have, like, successful doesn't necessarily mean that you're making six figures, right? Like, but you're going to have a purposeful life that's going to be worthwhile and successful. But that's also through a Christian perspective, and that's not, like, so maybe part of it is that it's...
I think it's still maybe. If you're passionate and you work hard about something, you might be successful. I think that's always the case, no matter what your race is.
Yeah.
You might be a failure. You could be an
experience,
entrepreneur and just fail. You're super passionate. You're maybe even skilled. It didn't work out. There's too many variables in life. Life's way too gray to just make it like a formula, I think. Passion plus
So you're
work
saying
ethic.
the American dream is panned out? Or no?
What do you mean panned out?
Like, is it true or not?
I think it goes to degrees. So work hard plus passion equals how much opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in the U.S. it's a greater chance percentage wise than somewhere else, but it's not 100%.
Yeah.
They actually looked at I listened to this Freakonomics podcast where they talked about how the American dream, like, if you define it as being from like starting in the bottom 20% family income wise to the top 20%, if you just make that the standard for like the American dream of pulling yourself up and working hard and doing that, like, in the percentage of people, of kids who are born in the lower 20% and make it to the top 20% income wise, like the percentages in Canada are higher than the U.S.
Oh, snap.
Now, maybe there's a lot of other variables, like maybe
they're socialists in Canada.
Yeah, maybe in Canada, they don't make as much and stuff. There's less people, all those different things.
Percents are weird. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can skew the data to make it any way you want, but it was a really interesting podcast. I should maybe put it in the notes or something.
Yeah,
but,
that would be interesting.
But
I'd be interested to
it even depends. Like you have a greater chance of the American dream in Iowa than you do like San Francisco.
Sure.
So it varies.
Well, yeah, because it costs $1,600 a month for a one-room apartment in San Francisco.
Yeah, and the top 20% in San Francisco is making a lot more than the top 20% in Iowa.
Oh, for sure.
So I think it's all on a scale and it's all on variance. And a lot of times in campaigns or political parties, it's like super simplified. And then some people get their dreams broken because they said, I worked hard and I was super passionate and I'm not, I'm still oppressed or I'm still whatever.
Right. But then to circle back to what you were saying, John, like maybe part of it is my own unhealthy reaction to feeling like my life and who I am and my identity is under attack and like being devalued by the overall message that's being thrown out there by some groups.
Get over it, Dave. You're white.
Maybe
you're just white.
I'm just kidding.
No, so it's an interesting thing. Yeah. I'm not saying that I have a right perspective on it.
Well, I mean, you got to admit, but if there was a movement like in 2018, to like emphasize the importance and the rich heritage of white America, people would lose their minds.
Yes,
like absolutely, and that. Like, I get we can't do all the things all the time. Like, we can't have everybody care about everything all the time.
Right.
But, like, some small part of me is like, that's actually kind of sad because we have heritage and we have culture. And maybe it's just because that's been the default for so long.
The people are tired of it.
Yeah. Like, let's have a different kind of conversation. And I'm fine with that. Like, I think there should be value in all different cultures and but
like 60 years ago, black people couldn't eat in the same spot, in a restaurant,
so we do
or
have
a movie theater.
To go,
so like, we're not that removed from radical, blatant, in the front of day, inequalities like that,
right.
And part of it, I think from a more left or liberal perspective is like, white people just quit complaining now because we just brought this up. Like, as soon as we brought it up, maybe I'm not.
I don't know.
Do you mean like as soon as people are like, we want a voice too, and you're like, what about our voice? Like, quit demeaning us.
Right.
Like, quit acting like you're the minority. I think is the outrage on the other.
Yeah. I think the tendency is to be like, oh no, we're being persecuted. No, you're not. Like.
Quit acting like you're persecuted, like you've been persecuting people for hundreds of years. Yeah. So shut up. And I think that as a white person, that's hard to hear. And then,
but you
also you're maybe like, I'm a person too. Yeah. So like I still have a voice.
It's a fine line to walk.
You can't bring that up though to discount somebody else's. You can't say, well, since your ancestors did this for hundreds of years, you're discounted in being able to have a voice and opinion now currently since you're not doing that.
Yeah, I don't think that's right. Discount people's
right, but
voice.
You just said like white people. You've been doing this for hundreds of years, so shut up.
But if you think of like some kind
I'm not
of
completely saying that's my stance,
right?
Sure.
But that is definitely a stance. Like that's a huge.
I'm sympathizing with it a little bit, but I'm not.
Okay, so like if you think of maybe like a public conversation happening like in a coliseum or like whatever.
Yep.
Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. So
Live.
for the last few hundred years, it's been a white dude talking, like nonstop, just running the show. Like, here's what's going to happen, and then all of a sudden, like in the past century or so, like there's been another guy come up and a woman too, and they're starting to have a conversation.
Okay. Yep.
I think it's fair to have, like, if another white dude wants to come up and start talking again, to be like, shut up. Like, let somebody else talk. So,
it depends on the conversation that's being had.
No, right. Okay. So conversation just being like emphasis on that type of person, I guess. So, yeah, this is not a very good example, I think. But hopefully it makes some kind of sense. Like, we've had all the screen time for like forever.
Sure. Yep.
And now like we're putting on a different TV show.
Yep.
And I feel like there has been a little bit of backlash being like, hey, you can't take away our voice. And it's like, well, nobody's really taking it away.
Right.
We're just finally learning to share.
And still, like, a lot of the people in power are still white dudes.
Right. We still
Like,
get a lot
still-
of screen time.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think to jump all the way back to the initial tweet, I think that the thing is there's and this so
the
then
nature of
I want your guys'
conversation.
opinion, right? Of I think that awareness is healthy, right? Like it's important to have awareness campaigns or, you know, people speaking about wrongdoing that's happening no matter what it is. And, you know, like that commercial is a healthy way of the white kid sitting up in northern Minnesota watching TV, helping him to not just only ever see white people on TV, like just to help normalize the fact that there's all sorts of different people and they, like, it's important, right? So awareness is important. And then there's a whole nother type of conversation, right, of like roundtable discussion, like proactive. Hey, we have all sorts of different opinions, but if we agree on these foundational things, or these are the foundational things we need to agree on, now how do we move forward is also healthy.
Okay.
You mean like looking to solutions?
Exactly. Not just bringing up a problem and being like, everything is wrong. I'm a victim. Everything is wrong. Everything is wrong. That's not necessarily bringing awareness.
What if
it could potentially be depending on how it's said, but generally it's just an unhealthy. I'm a victim. Everything's wrong. I'm mad at these people and these people, and I'm trying to get other people to be mad with me, but I'm not actually like proactively trying to find a solution and bridge the gap and try and say, hey, we're all equal. Like, I want to be friends with all of you of all different people groups, and let's find a solution. Like, instead, it's just this, I'm going to throw my crap out there.
Blame and
I'm
shame.
pissed about it. I'm going to shame everyone who's on this side of the fence, even if you're proactively, you know, like supporting people on my side of the fence because you fit into a bucket. And that's polarizing, and that's creating more of, that's widening the gap. And that's what a lot of the content that's out there and the conversations, not conversations because it's a one-sided thing, that I see, that's what's happening.
What if you scaled it back like on a macro level and you go like 100 years, like problem.
Yep.
And then you have like 20 years where we talk about the problem and we complain. And then after that, we're finding a solution. Like if you just pull it back from like in the identify the problem stage, in these huge issues, it takes years to identify the problem and to make that fully known. And we're just in the middle of the 50-year identify the problem from like maybe the human rights movement in the 60s and 70s, all those movements. And we're in that stage, and later on it'll be, okay, now let's find solutions.
But if we take it to a small scale, like, you know, like even smaller in just personal relationships or a work meeting or whatever it is, if you're the person who just comes and says, you're always wrong, and you just throw out, I'm the victim, everything's wrong here, like, have you ever seen a healthy solution come from that? Unless the person who you're throwing it at is super mature and has a great ability to, like, take it all, apologize, and then try to help you, like, come to a middle ground and then work towards a solution. Like, that never works, to just throw your crap, or very small percentage, and it completely counts on the other party being mature enough to say that you're upset, forgive, and apologize, and then try to find the middle ground and work from there.
So, I think...
Yeah, go.
Oh, sorry. I think it's hard to say when a person comes to you and says, I'm the victim, you did this wrong.
Yep.
It's very hard to say to that person or to demand forgiveness from that person. I think you can request forgiveness, but you cannot demand it. You have to wait until they're mature enough to forgive. I think forgiveness is the solution in order to move forward.
Yep.
But when someone has been wronged, to demand forgiveness on your timeline never works. So you're like, get over it, forgive me.
Right.
It never works as a response.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
They have to come to that on their own terms in order for healing to really happen for themselves and for you.
Yeah. So, David, you were saying regarding your tweet, sometimes I wonder if all the talk about racism, equality, privilege, et cetera, is widening the gap.
Yep.
We're adding to it.
Just a little bit. But no, you had said that a lot of the conversation that you hear, or all the talk, is like just sort of angry, like throw your crap around.
Right.
The one caution I would have with that, though, is logically, if there is a problem, and you hear someone incorrectly describe it or whatever and talk about it, and they don't present a solution, that doesn't mean that the problem doesn't exist or isn't real. So I think in some respects I would agree, like the conversations like that the culture has been having isn't very productive. Right. But I don't think that is basis for arguing that we should stop having the conversation.
Agreed.
I think we need to get better about how we introduce it, how we explain it, and figure out what the purpose of having these conversations is, because we do want resolution. It's not just like, I'm mad and I want everyone to know about it. Right. Like, that doesn't fix anything.
Right. We need to insert more grace into the conversation. For sure. And more benefit of the doubt on both sides. Yes. So that there's room to come up with a solution. Mm-hmm. So that there's emotional space for healing to happen.
Yeah. Because I feel at this point, like especially in social media, any article that's shared, any opinion whatsoever is like, oh, well, you're on that side of the fence, right? And this is how you feel and think, and that's how you want to approach the problem. In real life, in these kind of conversations that we're having right now, there's a lot more room, like you said, to talk and disagree and agree, and figure out, like, well, what are we actually trying to accomplish? Right.
So more offline conversations.
Maybe a little bit. I mean, it's hard because we sort of just live on social media. Yeah. And I don't see that going away. Right. I mean, unless there's an apocalypse.
I think there's within this conversation, there's necessarily so many labels used, and usually those labels are not fully representative of people's experiences and or selves. Yeah. And that creates anxiety. It's reductive?
Yeah. Labels are reductive.
Right. Yeah. And so it heightens the energy of the conversation because the labels are mismatching people's actual experience, whether that be yours, Dave, or somebody else who is a part of a minority group. Right. And it's like the labels are almost like a faulty tool for using to solve the problem. Right. But we haven't quite figured out how to not use labels when engaging in the conversation.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think it's hard because I do think, I think it is important for the church to be a part of the voice that's saying, like, we need to work on unity. Yeah. Racism is a problem. There is inequality. Like, how do we, as people who are supposed to be, after Christ's heart and, like, literally trying to reach the nations and trying to show love to everyone, no matter who your neighbor is or whatnot. Like, I think that the church does need to be having a voice on that. Yeah. The hard thing is that it seems to oftentimes be done from more of like a ignorant perspective instead of a productive let's try and have discussion. Let's not label things. And that's
accusations. It's filled with a lot of accusations,
right? That polarizes one side or the other.
Accusations is always looking at the past, and there's a judgment that has to be given when you're dealing with the past and with accusations. The future,
right?
The only place where a solution exists is the future.
Right.
Which we're not quite sure if it exists or not, to bring it back to that discussion.
Closer to it.
Crap, this has been fun.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I don't know that we actually solved any of the world's problems, but I have things to think about. So yes, let's not stop.
Hopefully, we didn't attack you, Dave. I didn't want to.
No, I think
I just wanted to bring some
it's good. And
I wanted to attack. That's why I brought it up on Twitter.
That's why we brought you on. We wanted you to roast, but
good deal.
Cool. All right, so let's not stop having conversations, but let's each try and have some personal accountability to be trying to find solutions and not just adding to the problems.
I don't know. Dude, let's place the accountability on just like the systems and powers that be, and then we won't have to do anything to change it.
Right. We can just sit
Donald
back
will totally take care of it.
Well, that was one point I was going to bring up earlier when we were talking about the laws in place.
Yep.
Is I think there was it wasn't on the podcast, but I was talking with Dave Jr. About kind of what affects change in a country. Because I think at this point I was wrestling with like how important is my vote kind of thing,
right?
Pre-election and whatever, and we got to talking about like, well, it's essentially. I mean, I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but he essentially said like it's your Christian duty to vote well, because the people that we elect will put laws in place that will change the country for good.
Or for bad.
Or for bad, yeah. And my response to that was that the laws are not actually what influences the culture. That we as Christians, especially as Christians, are supposed to, on a relational basis, rather than like an external legal system, affect change in the culture that then influences like the country and its culture as a whole. Right. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think laws can be put in effect that actually change the way the country, our culture, I guess, but how we think and how we react
by brute force?
Right.
Okay.
So I think that would not be an organic change. Yep. It would not be based on relationships. It's based on the letter.
Be an external.
So,
and it's not going to necessarily cause an actual heart change.
The speed limit
change your actions.
Does affect the way how fast people drive.
Right.
Based on the punishment determined for not following the law.
Right.
So I think that does affect the culture. It does affect what happens on the ground every day.
But maybe if we really loved well enough, we just wouldn't go so fast that we could kill people if we ran into them with our cars.
Right. But I think what you're talking about is like the hope of organic change motivated more by love or for thought for the common good instead of it being based on fear of punishment. Yeah. Because the law has a hammer at the end of it.
Yep. I guess I have more hope for that kind of change than I do for a legal.
Well, and what you're saying, I mean, is the reality of the heart of the issue is you can't have these types of hard conversations about real tough things where everyone has different experiences and have them be like effective without relationship. Like it's very hard to do. Because without relationship, how am I supposed to trust that you actually mean what you're saying and that you, like, whether or not your actions are perfect, your intent is for the greater good of anyone who's involved, right? So these big things of race and gender and equality and all this, I mean, it's very hard to actually affect change and have those conversations and, blast it however way you do without relationship. And that's why a Facebook argument is not actually going to change anyone's heart or perspective. It's just going to piss some people off, and it's going to rally two sides who are going to fight about it.
Right.
But it's not going to, in the end, there's a very few cases, I would guess, where a Facebook argument actually changed how anyone ever saw something.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is there was one instance where my mind had not been made up. And
Right.
I read just a gigantic thread of all these different comments of my friends. And I kind of, it distilled for me like what I thought.
Right.
But none of them actually changed my mind. It just like helped me
It
figure
give you
out.
more perspective.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I agree with you, John, that the political route or the legal route is somewhat clunky and unartistic in the way that it goes about in influencing cultural change. Like, I'm with you that, like, I don't care as much about that.
Right.
Or I'm more apathetic to that of, like, I don't know how I could, my personal activity affects that compared to, creating artistic, like telling a story that actually affects change.
Yeah. Well, and I think of, actually, because I just saw, was it Budweiser maybe? They had an ad for their beer, and it's the Repeal Reserve from like 1933 or something. Okay. And it makes me think of like Prohibition. Like,
Sure.
So they changed laws. You can't have any alcohol, but the country as a whole still loved alcohol.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it did not change
It
the
didn't
culture
matter.
one bit, and
Yeah.
they raged against it.
Right.
I just finished up a book called The Alcoholic Republic,
Oh, yeah.
which was somebody's PhD thesis in like the 70s. I know I'm a nerd, but
Nerds are good.
about like alcohol consumption at the turn of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s, and then sort of like the movement of prohibitionists and the revivals that happened and everything.
Okay.
It's a super interesting topic if
Yeah.
you look from like 1800 to 1933 back when it was
Yeah.
taken away and repealed. And
Yeah.
but yeah, there's an element of if the larger public believes that alcohol is good and they like to drink it, that it doesn't matter what the law is,
Right.
or it will
Well,
eventually get overturned.
I mean, look, Old Testament to New Testament. The law didn't work,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I mean, all that does is it forces your stuff underground, right? It forces you to do it more in secret and...
Yeah. It exposes our condition.
Right.
But I don't think it
doesn't.
helps to change
Yeah.
it.
I think another, besides exposing conditions, I think laws can definitely protect people.
Right. Yeah.
There's definitely a protection, and people do live their lives somewhat based on incentives. And if you know that you do this, and there'll be probably a good result,
Right.
versus okay, I'm going to shoot a guy. There is a consequence.
Right.
That is a basic human thing that
Right.
helps a society just operate.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
definitely a necessity to laws.
Okay.
I mean, like even the speed limit, like your point of, well, if we all loved well enough, we would drive slow enough. Well,
we
you
don't
would get-
love well enough.
even if we all did, I would still get stuck behind the
Yeah.
30-year-old who felt like 20 miles an hour was this comfortable speed for her to drive.
I think there's a
And,
Yeah.
there would still be that chaos then of, well, 50 miles an hour is completely safe for me to drive,
Right.
and I'm hopping
I mean, I
cars,
could probably handle 80. I mean, whatever.
Right.
I think
So
there's. I
the
don't.
need for
I don't
that.
know if
Yeah.
there's a necessity. I think there's a practicality to laws. I don't know if there's a necessity. If we ever got to a state in which everyone lived in so much harmony, well, I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
can.
There's
Well,
It's
yeah.
if people ever became good-willed or loving enough,
but we,
whereas like the majority, 97% of people are super loving, other-centered type people who exemplify, then maybe you need less laws. I don't know.
the desire of man's heart is only
mean-
evil continually, so I don't think that we're ever going to get there.
Well, yeah. So,
Mine's not. I don't know.
in the hypothetical, like if we all got to the righteousness of the Godhead and we could just like hang out in perfect harmony, my question then maybe, because I don't think God necessarily invented laws. Like I think they were a natural byproduct of like good and evil and right and wrong.
Right.
And those like he wrote them down for us to understand them because we didn't inherently know them. But I think it provided a level of perfection was actually attainable.
Sure.
There might be laws in the sense that we all know innately, like this is how we behave. This is how we live our lives.
Yep. You don't have to have
and
a
you
law.
could maybe write those down and be like, here are the laws.
Yeah.
But yeah, you might not ever need to enforce them.
There wouldn't necessarily have to be, and if you break the law, here are the legal repercussions based on the severity of it, right?
Yeah,
like that whole...
It's really interesting. What does a society do when somebody does something that we all inherently know is heinous?
Kill them.
Right, usually.
I mean, yeah.
Usually that's the responses.
Our animal instinct to it is,
Yep.
Like, you see it now, like with all the pedophilia coming out in Hollywood.
Yep.
There is a rage. There is a this is not okay that comes, and usually accusation and condemnation, but there is an inherent, we must destroy these people, if not physically or literally. We've got to destroy their careers, their ability to continue to make a life for themselves, everything, because it's so bad.
Yep.
I think the question you could ask is, what if we lean towards forgiveness instead of, execution?
Right.
Grace.
And would that be a better world if we?
Yeah.
I actually think, I think that's part of the frustration of. I think you can make a case for like, God forgives so much, and that's why there's so much chaos. That's why there's so much. There's so much. A lightning bolt doesn't come out of the sky.
That's why
when
we're
you
all
screw
still
a kid.
around. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
You're allowed to live, and society might do it. I don't know. I didn't really explain that well, but
No, I mean that's an ongoing conversation. I think, especially in the Christian community.
Right.
For sure.
What is justice?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what is forgiveness? Because I don't
And
think.
what role do we play in that?
Well, and how does society differ from the things that we maybe think about, like a Christian society? Because there are a lot of people out there who like just do bad stuff. And if it was if it was up to the Christians, would we just like boot them out of the camp? I don't know. Is that a picture of eternity in hell? I don't know.
It's weird though, because Jesus throws a wrench in it by on the cross. The people are like,
that's a major wrench.
People are nailing him to a cross and killing him, and he goes, "God forgive them. They don't know what they're doing."
Yeah,
it
was the complete reversal of the justice system,
and so he died.
Yeah.
So a terrible, completely unjust thing happened because he was like, "I'm not going to do anything about it."
And it was on purpose.
If you're going to try to kill me, I guess you killed me.
Yeah.
What?
That's nuts.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, that's the way I like to run things."
Yeah.
And everyone else in the world is like, "No."
Yeah. Somehow the idea kind of caught on. I mean, imperfectly maybe, but it's crazy.
I still think that forgiveness is the most radical thing that you can do in a society to not count someone's wrongs against them.
Yeah.
It almost always remains in the minority.
Well,
and anytime that happens, it upends the way society runs.
Yeah. I think Christianity has been around long enough in enough cultures like that we tend to gloss over that. But like I've read lots of different accounts of like missionaries who go to these like crazy out of the way places, and the biggest impact by far, like more than miracles or anything else, is like just straight up forgiveness. Because they don't get it. Like, that's not the way, like, that we tick.
It's nuts.
Mm-hmm. Hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, John, for joining us.
Yeah, man. It was fun.
It's been a super fun podcast. I don't know. You guys want to wrap it up?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
John's cigar is at the end, so
I've been milking it.
So that's kind of our good timer. If someone smokes a cigar,
yep.
As soon as it's done,
I was done like 45 minutes ago.
You smoke fast.
Yeah.
So I get to talking and then it goes out.
Go to iTunes and click subscribe on The Roasted Christian.
Do it up.
And if you're feeling really generous, Cowboys and Unicorns podcast as well.
Yeah.
This is Dan.
This is Dave. Have a good night.